welcome all of you to this webinar, and thanks so much for attending. Today we are going to deal with what can be done towards a more inclusive chemical community, and this is an initiative that is organized by EuChemS. I am sure most of you are familiar with what EuChemS is, but let me just give you a brief summary of who we are and what we do. We are a supranational organization coordinating the work of 50 member societies belonging to 33 different countries. And well, we always deal with policy issues, and we try to make all these chemical societies speak with one single voice. We are organized in divisions and working parties, but we also have task groups, which are groups that we establish to deal with different or particular aspects of chemistry. One of those is the task group on inclusion and diversity. And among the things that we do are that we organize the Global Women's Breakfast, which I am sure some of you attended on the occasion last year, and we hope you will attend the next years also. As I say, today, within this context, we are very lucky and we have the privilege to count with Alejandra Palermo, who's a real expert in the subject, and she works at the Royal Society of Chemistry, which I think is one of the leading chemical societies in all these issues. So let me just briefly introduce to you Ale Palermo. She's by training a chemical engineering, but for the recent years, she has been dealing more with policy issues, and in particular with things dealing with inclusion and diversity. She's currently responsible for external relations at the Royal Society of Chemistry, leading a team working in priority areas that include international large programs. And the main objective of her team is to drive change, which is very important, towards an inclusive chemistry culture. Along these lines, they have published a lot of reports. So I think she's the right person, the most adequate person to talk about the issues we are going to deal with today. She will share the screen with all of you, and then if you want to ask questions, we would appreciate if you put them down in the question and answers box and not use the chat. So at the end, when Ale finishes her speech, we will deal with all these questions and answers, and we want to have an interactive session. So thank you very much, Ale, for joining, for dedicating your time to us, which I know we have a very tight agenda. And okay, the floor, or well, I should say the screen is yours. Thank you very much, Ale.
Thank you very much, Pilar, and thank you very much for your very kind introduction. It is really an honor to be here and to talk about all our work about inclusion and diversity. It's something that we are very proud of and we are very committed to. Let me share my screen so I can start with my presentation. Can you all see my screen? Yes, perfect. So let me just go. So last December, we launched our new inclusion and diversity strategy to 2025. And the central objective of the strategy is increasing the diversity of people choosing the chemical sciences and fulfilling their potential. And this new inclusion and diversity strategy is based in three main pillars. First, ensuring that we take a data and evidence-driven approach to all our actions and positions, that we focus on underrepresented groups, and here we talk about two different areas, attracting them into chemistry and ensuring they are able to fulfill their potential, so ensure their progression into chemistry. And the last pillar is about sharing findings and knowledge so that we can effectively influence the culture of chemistry globally. Meanwhile, I'm presenting Laura, that has kindly agreed to present all the links in the chat. So you will find in the chat all the links to all the reports that I'm talking about today. Thanks, Laura. So let me talk a bit about the strategy in a more simplified way. In a nutshell, what our strategy aims is at increasing the representation of underrepresented groups entering chemistry and progressing in chemistry. So one question is, what does it mean in our discipline, the term underrepresented groups? Well, it means women today, it means women at senior levels, and this is compared with the general population. It means about Black and minoritized ethnic groups and their progression. It means about the retention of Black chemists compared to the demographics, to the national demographics. It is about the deprived socioeconomic background and the impact that it has on attraction of students into chemistry, of individuals into chemistry. It is about LGBT plus individuals, and in particular, I'm talking here about non-binary and transgender people. And also it's about disabled people at all levels within chemistry. And for each one of these, we would like to influence change by 2025. So if there is one thing that I'd like you to take away today from our strategy, our implementation and our work, is that chemistry today does not welcome everyone, but it should, and it will. So let me tell you a bit about how this happened, how they became up with this strategy. In February 2018, we published our first report, The Diversity Landscape in the Chemical Sciences, which analyzes available data to capture the state of diversity in our discipline. So we knew the baseline. We found that chemistry is not representative of society as a whole. It identified particularly areas where improvement is needed, such as disabilities, sexual orientation, as I mentioned, ethnicity, and socioeconomic background. But also, it noted that despite of the work that many organizations have done, including us, this research showed that gender inequality continues to be a big challenge in our community. Retention and development of women into senior roles remains poor in academia and chemistry, including compared to other disciplines, and here in the graph is compared to physics, for instance. The numbers drops off at each stage of the academic career ladder for chemistry within the higher education system. And it continues to be much more increasingly dominated by men as we go into more senior. And this is not specific to academia. A similar picture is found in industry. So as a consequence of this report, we established the Inclusion and Diversity Fund, which provides support to the community up to £5,000 for innovative projects that will help the chemical sciences community to be more inclusive and diverse and cover all diversity aspects. And it's open to the community worldwide, so it's an opportunity for any one of you to apply for the University Fund. And the link is in the chat again. Since then, since we launched the Diversity Landscape report, we began to work on specific research projects to understand the barriers faced by different underrepresented groups. Our very first work focused on understanding the lack of progression in developing and retaining women in leadership positions. And this is the Breaking the Barriers report, which was in 2018, December 2018. In there, we identified three main barriers to retention and progression of women in academia. The first one was the academic funding structures that create uncertainty and put unnecessary pressure in individuals. And you can think about this related to short-term contracts, to the type of research funding that we have today, which is well short-term, and so forth. The other barrier it is about the academic culture that perhaps can drive talented individuals elsewhere. And you can think about the competitive environment. You can think about the long hours or the expected long hours in academia. You can think about the lack of flexibility and so forth. And the third barrier is about the balancing responsibilities, including care and responsibilities at each stage of the career path. Of course, all these barriers affect both women and men, but they disproportionately affect more women than men. We need to address this to drive change for all. So in this report, again, you can see the link in the chat, we have recommendations for all of us, for each one of us. The first one is about working together to lobby for change, demonstrate best practice, or demonstrate good practice, I should say, and influence other organizations. We also talk about a sponsorship, which actually really matters to anyone and can be a major contribution to progression and success at all career stages. So we call to support and sponsor women to succeed. We talk about nominating women scientists for prizes and awards. We also ask, and we make a point about nominations of women by women are still too low. So we call women and men to be part of the nomination process. Act as a role model, demand and expect flexibility. Be proud of your own achievements at work and at home. Don't be afraid to ask for sponsorship, for mentorship, and be proud of doing this. This work helped us to design and develop multiple interventions to break down some of those barriers identified. And in particular, we launched 2 types of grants, the grants for carers and the accessibility grants. Those provide up to £1,000 per year to any individual, any member who actually needs to attend events or professional career development events, and they have care responsibilities or they need assistance to do so. An unexpected learning from this report was the influence or the impact of bullying and harassment in the community. This is something that we were not looking for, but through the survey and the research and looking and talking to the many researchers that we have done through this research, we identified bullying and harassment. And so since then, we launched a support line, which is accessible to any chemist, which is totally confidential. And also, we produce a video to describe what actually means bullying and harassment and what can we do to avoid, as a bystander, to avoid bullying and harassment. And this affects women and affects men and affects everyone, but disproportionately affects more women than men. So it is clear from our reports that talented women are leaving the sector before reaching their full potential. And many of those that stay are not progressing at the same rate that their male peers. And change is happening, but nowhere near fast enough. Furthermore, at the current rate of change, a simple statistical analysis of our higher education data tells that we will never reach gender parity in academia for the chemical sciences unless there is a step change in the process. And I mentioned this for women, but we can also say exactly the same for other underrepresented groups. In conclusion, we identify that progression for women in academia is an important barrier. And of course, publishing output continues to be an important metric for promotion in academia. So we embarked in another piece of work looking at biases within the publishing system. So we analyzed the gender profile of authors of over 700,000 manuscript submissions across all our journals between 2014 to 2018. And we assigned gender to names using an established published method, an algorithm that is very well known. And of course, the limitation of this algorithm is that gender could only be assigned in binary terms, as well as authors from specific countries of specific languages cannot be considered because it's different with the algorithm to assign gender to those names. So that really calls for the importance of self-reporting for gender self-reporting. We use this data to gain a picture of the gender profile of the FRSC's author community over the time period analyzed. We also determine the gender balance at each stage of the publishing pipeline. And where appropriate, we investigate interactions between variables. So what does the gender balance of our research community look like? We identify that the proportion of women submitting to our journal is around 36%. And this number is comparable with other measures to use to assess the overall gender balance of the chemistry community. And so compared to this baseline of 36% of women, we found that substantially fewer female authors are corresponding authors. That is slightly more female are first authors, indicating the lack of seniority. And there are substantially fewer female reviewers. In conclusion, our analysis, and I'm not going to describe much more, there is a report, and again, the link is available on the chat. In conclusion, our analysis of gender bias across the publishing pipeline highlighted several areas of imbalance. And it begins with the allocation of positions in the author list and the choice of where to submit a paper, a research paper. And this imbalance persists in the peer review process. And in general, women are less likely to have their articles cited, contributed again to the overall challenge of achieving and maintaining visibility in their field, which of course has an impact on the progression. Overall, there appear to be a small bias at every stage in the publishing pipeline, which results in a significant cumulative effect that hinders women and favors more established researchers, which are often male researchers. After this piece of research we published, we put an action plan to combat gender biases in publishing. And we encourage intervention from the community and also from other publishers in order to increase awareness and call for representation of the research community at boards. That is, increasing the number of women in decision-making positions. And we did our changes in our boards to represent at least 36% women in all boards. And this led to the development of a new inclusion and diversity framework for action in publishing to set the standard for driving change within the academic publishing industry. And it does not only focus on gender. Of course, much of our work and our current evidence is around gender. And so, as you can see, there is a big focus on gender, but we are looking with the framework in a much more to increase diversity in all areas. Since launched the framework for action, which is almost like a toolkit in order to actually increase inclusion and diversity in all areas within the publishing business. We invited other publishers to join us and to commit to increase inclusion and diversity within the publishing. And today I'm very pleased to say that we have around 50 publishers joining this that joined the commitment within chemistry, within STEM, and also beyond the STEM. And I believe that this could have a tremendous impact in the research community at large. And in December, last December, we launched a new process for self-reporting gender in our publishing system, and many other publishing organizations as well have joined that self-reporting. Well, of course, it will have an impact in how we report the biases that we identify. Gender identity is, of course, another important area of our work. And jointly with the Institute of Physics and the Royal Astronomical Society, we created a network supporting members of the physical sciences community who identify themselves as LGBT+. We carried out a survey in the UK to explore the current climate within the working environment for LGBT+ physical scientists. And we also follow up this survey with interviews and further research. And the objective was to increase awareness of the needs and experience of the LGBT+ community, and to capture the current situation as a benchmark, and to know where we need to build on to progress in inclusivity. And also to make recommendations for action. We produce a report which summarizes our findings and our actions. And again, I think it's in the chat, the link. And just to highlight two of the key findings from the report. First, around 20% of the LGBT+ respondents have experienced exclusionary behavior. And around 50% of the respondents indicated that they saw a lack of awareness of LGBT+ issues within the working environment. And of course, that has terrible consequences for individuals in terms of the exclusionary behavior that they feel. Since then, we developed an LGBT+ toolkit around key issues that needed to be addressed. And in doing so, it was very important to be mindful of the different audiences. So we created audience-specific booklets. And for instance, the booklet for Allies and colleagues is a resource for anyone looking to learn more about acting and allyship and solidarity with the LGBT+ community, covering areas such as positive accountability and bystander intervention, and as well as a learning opportunity. We also produce a glossary, and there's a lot of resources within our website, and the link I think is there. In December last year, we launched our first biennial diversity data report. And this report examines diversity across all our activities, from membership to education to publishing to the grants that we provide, and including our own governance. And while publishing this report is a very important step to demonstrate transparency in our actions, we aim to report more and better quality data in the future. And we hope to develop further trust within the community to encourage higher rates of self-reporting. This report is as good as it is only if we have the data. And for that, we need the self-reporting. And in areas where self-reporting is low, we aren't able to learn much from our data, and we cannot transform that into corrective action. This data report clearly shows that there is an underrepresentation of disabled people in our work, according to the UK demographics at least. But what does it mean, this? Well, either disabled people do not follow a career in chemistry, or the RSC does not engage with them, or chemists tend not to self-report disabilities. And we would like to unpick this. We don't know the real answer. So to begin with this, we are reviewing our internal processes and products and outputs. And the question is, are they accessible to all? Are we providing opportunities for disabled chemists and disabled members to engage with us? So an internal analysis of what the RSC does for disabled chemists has begun this year. We have a new member of the team working on disability and accessibility with us to understand the needs of disabled people, as well as consulting with the community to help shape our work. And there is a lot going on in this area. We had a specific call this year, the Inclusion and Diversity Fund that I mentioned before, ring-fenced to disability and accessibility. And we fund many projects, and I just mentioned here 5 of those projects. One, which is accessible laboratories, really focus on chronic illnesses and unseen disabilities. Another one about tackling barriers for neurodivergent early career researchers. Another one, establishing a disabled network. One really focused on blind and visually impaired students, and how you can include those students better within the community. And as well, unlocking chemistry concepts using sign language. Another important aspect of our work on disability and accessibility is about inclusive language approaches, understanding how we talk about it. We understand disability as a broad umbrella term comprising diverse experience of mental and physical differences. So both are seen or unseen disabilities. But we also are very keen to use and promote the use of the social model of language for disability, which says that disability is not an individual characteristic inherent to a person, but it is instead a societal construct which arises in interaction between a person and the inaccessible environment and discrimination that they encounter within society. So this model states that it is society that must change for the better, not the disabled people. More recently, we embarked on a new piece of research. Previous research has shown that a lack of sense of belonging in a discipline, defined as a feeling of membership and acceptance, is an important factor in retention of people. In addition, unless people feel they belong, they are likely to thrive in their profession. So that's why we have conducted the very first ever study of chemical scientists' lived experiences of belonging. Our new report is based on in-depth discussions with chemists from around the world who share their experiences through interviews and focus groups. And everybody that we spoke to said that their sense of belonging in chemistry mattered to them. And questions of belonging and experiences of not belonging are particularly important for people from underrepresented groups in the chemical sciences. And experiencing and recounting experiences of not belonging was painful and upsetting for many participants. People spoke of having to hide aspects of themselves to work. At work. And also we learned about the fluidity of the concept of belonging, or the feeling of belonging. This report, which again is in the chat, the link, includes what actually helps or enables the feeling of belonging. And we talk about connection, we talk about the importance of the diverse groups, we talk about respecting individuals for themselves. And also talks about the intention and being included, of course, and the intention of the individual to belong, to feel that they belong to, the role that each one of us have in this. And we also talk about the actions that we can all have to build a more culture, a better culture of belonging for individuals, for organizations, and building your own sense of belonging. I strongly recommend you to have a look at this interesting report, which actually we will continue to work and produce a toolkit and helping individuals and organizations to create a more welcoming environment. So what's next for us? Well, our priorities for this year and for the next year or so are very ambitious, but with clear objectives and with ultimate aim of arriving to a set of actions for us and others to actually make the community much more inclusive. And within that is race and ethnicity, a priority for us, disability and accessibility, as I mentioned, and understanding how the diverse socioeconomic backgrounds intersected with diversity characteristics impact in the attraction and retention of individuals within chemistry. But let me focus on race and ethnicity. Acknowledging that race discrimination exists in society and consequently in the chemical sciences is essential to changing the system. And this has been our position from the very beginning when we openly communicated last year our clear and bold stand in response to the Black Lives Movement and the killing of George Floyd. And achieving race equality is not just a social justice issue. We know that diversity of thought and in the decision-making processes is good for business, and it's good for science, and it's good for society. And there is plenty of evidence to back this. So in 2020, in August 2020, we analyzed and published the data for the academic chemistry pipeline at UK universities, which is the data that we can have access to, for Asian, Black, and mixed ethnicities, which clearly demonstrates the continuous loss of Black talent, with a significant attrition from undergraduate to PhD for Black chemistry, as you can see here in the violet color in the graph, going from around 4% undergraduates to 0% level of professors in the UK. Of course, this is within the HISA data. If there are fewer than 5 points, it would be counted as 0. And a similar picture is apparent in sectors beyond academia. We know that this similar concept happens in industry. Since then, since we released this data in 2020, we updated that data and expanded to include other areas, for instance, ethnicity and gender, the type of university that those Black and other ethnic minorities go to, and we are further analyzing the available data. We also began to explore by hearing, we started hearing from Black and minority ethnic chemists, and hearing from them their lived experiences. And this is a research project to identify the barriers to access and progression for Black and minoritized ethnic groups within chemistry. We have then begun to explore the issues in industry by working with senior representatives of different industry sectors, including small and medium enterprises, on what common challenges they face and the common actions that we may take to accelerate the development of Black innovation entrepreneurs. More important, we are trying to understand the impact on the global research ecosystem. And we have seen the progress that science has made around gender, not as fast as we would like to, but moving in the right direction. In the last 20 years has been a lot of efforts from many to achieve gender parity. However, to drive racial and ethnic equality, defining goals and measuring progress is much more difficult than in gender. One of the biggest issues in this area is the current limitation of collecting data that is comparable, especially when we consider the global view. We are working with funders of research and publishers to have an open discussion on how we could align and so that we can measure where we are and how can we make progress, and come with an agreement how can we measure this. So I would like to invite you to the Inclusion and Diversity Forum 2021, which is on December the 8th. And in here, the focus of the forum will be on race and ethnicity. We will present some of the findings of our research on race and ethnicity and inequalities. We will present some of the opportunities and the challenges that we have. And we also highlight the report, A Sense of Belonging in the Chemical Sciences. And we know that the lack of feeling of belonging in the chemical science affects in particular underrepresented groups. We also will award the FRSC 2021 Inclusion and Diversity Prize. And we will hear from community-driven projects funded by the Inclusion and Diversity Fund. We'll hear from the community how they are working together to make the chemistry community much more inclusive. And I would like to finish with two slides. One is an invitation to nominate individuals for the Inclusion and Diversity Prize. Then that closes on January the 18th. And this is for anyone that you know that could, any individual, team, or organization that has done a significant contribution, an innovative contribution to inclusion and diversity within the chemical sciences community. And the final slide is, let's work together. Together we can make a difference. This is something that we cannot do by ourselves. Let's work together to make a difference, to drive change in the culture of chemistry. Thank you very much for your attention. Happy to answer any questions.
First of all, thank you very much, Ale, for your time, for your excellent presentation, for all this data, and for having discussed with so many of the attendants. I would also, of course, like to thank the organizers, Ninetta, Laura, and Anna. Without them, these webinars would never be possible, and they always run so smoothly, and we never have problems. So thanks a lot, and congratulations. And also thanks to all of you attendants. I hope you have learned a lot. And let me remind you that if any one of you would like to have an attendance certificate, you can ask by email, and then we can provide it to you free of charge, obviously. So thank you very much, and let's look to a more inclusive chemistry community. Thanks to all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.